Bonjour, Guten Tag, Buongiorno, Guten Tag. Hello, these are the results of the British jury. No, that was last Saturday. An excellent win for Britain. We came in exactly where we thought. Hi, I'm Nick from Descartes. I help people sort out Internet of Things solutions, and I'm also a forum moderator. As you can tell from the grey hair, I've been around for a while, and as such, I have some very fixed views on things. And I'm going to talk to you about webhooks and why I think they are the best way to get data out of the things stack. Because at the end of the day, all of the fantastic integrations that people have come up with to all of those different boards is still putting your data in somebody else's hands. And the cloud is just another name for somebody else's computer. So I'm a great fan of getting these things sorted out and into my own systems. Now we've got a poll, which if you just bear with me, because I've got 3 different monitors to look at, that asks which integrations you use the most. I'd be grateful if you could fill that in. Because of the way that my eye line works, I can see the Q&A tab in my left eye. So I'm going to ignore the chat that might pop up. So webhooks are the absolute simplest system. Let me get my screen shared so we can get into the details. I'll just check it's actually coming up, and it's looking good on my test. Sure, hide this little dialogue. So webhooks. Webhooks are basically a web request, just like we use a web browser, that go straight to your server and can be processed by any software that you happen to create. It creates the least load on the things stack, and it's connectionless. And because if you use some really old-fashioned technology like I do, like PHP, for instance, and Apache and MySQL, you've got a whole multi-decade raft of different pieces of information that have come together to create a really reliable system. So I'm going to show you a starter that does not require any installation whatsoever. But first of all, obviously, I need to have something uplinking, and I know that's quite frequently uplinking, but here is a generic node. I appreciate the video is a little bit smaller at the bottom, so I'll zoom in for you. I'm one of the lucky ones. I've got number 23 that is doing the uplinking frequently, and I have an Adafruit Feather RFM95, which is my go-to press a button, get an uplink device on my desk, and you can see those have just come through there. So let's look at this integration. And what have we got? We have some PHP that's written by someone who started PHP when it was called Personal Homepage. So I'm not going to bike shed the details. And you're wondering, where do I get this PHP file from? And I will tell you in a second once I see some activity on the poll. So we have some incoming information that is in JSON format. We cut out some of the pieces of information, and then the PHP rather handily provides us with both a daily log, a log per application, and a log per device. There are no settings required to be entered into this, but you do need some web space that runs PHP. And rather handily, here's one I created earlier. So we shall just log in to the demo. Rest assured, I will be changing all of these URLs afterwards because I'm sure you're all very trustworthy people, but nonetheless. So I just pull over the file, and just to make life a little bit simpler, rather than having all those full stops in it, I'm going to call it demo. So one of the cute things is that I can actually check to see that I have actually installed it in the right place. So we want a webhook. As you can see, I've done this before. We'll just refresh that to make sure it's there. That just gives us the version number if we don't send any particular information. But the great thing is I can now copy and paste this over into set up the integration. So thumbs up in the chat if this is all going good for you. Anyone? Go on, someone put something in the chat. Great, excellent, thank you, Grant. Right, so where are we going next? We're going to add in the webhook. As I say, all of these fantastic integrations give all sorts of different levels of functionality, but I am a great fan of, excuse me, having my own data as well. And as you may have noticed, I've already got a webhook in there, and that means that I can have actually multiple different webhooks. So just looking at my crib sheet, I am going to, I don't know, say my webhook ID. So and for those who aren't familiar with who Maverick is, that's from Top Gun. I am going to use JSON, which is sort of a bit chatty as a format. Protocol buffers is used by the TTI Go dev team. It's far more compact and it's sort of much more binary format. But for mere mortals like myself, JSON gives us a lot more information. As you can see, there's some I've set up previously, and you can have a hack on those at a later date. So I just need to tell it the web address, and then we scroll down, and we get all of these different options, and you have to choose at least one, otherwise you won't get anything at all. Now, for the purposes of this demonstration, we will just have an uplink, and we will come back to what all of these other things might do for you later on. So I have that as a webhook, and I know some people have all sorts of stresses about moving to the V3 stack, but this is V3. I have been using it since the beginning of the year, and I'm doing this live, which some people said was not such a bright idea. So let's actually look in the see all activity. It says so the generic node's banging away there. We can see from the payload formatter that it's in fact actually 22 degrees in the office. A little bit humid because the gas heater's on, and there's my push button device. So let's see what's occurred at this end. And that makes me very happy. Oh, must remind myself to give the cats their flea jabs. Right, so if that's not proof it's live, I don't know what is. So we now have 4 different files. As promised, we have the file that gives us a log, a daily log, and that's done by date. And if I copy that, and I'll just use numbers, I can paste that in, and as you can see, I've got that straight into a spreadsheet, nicely tab delimited. We'll close that away because we don't really need to get into that. But in a similar vein, we also have the log for the application and for the devices. And as I say, this, as you've seen, happens straight out of the box. You don't need to sort of do any particular configuration, but you can then build upon all of this. So I'll just trigger a couple of more uplinks, and I will ask Viper, calling Viper, to release the second poll, because it would be really useful to find out what it is that people use as their primary coding, what their preferences are for a coding environment. So as I say, I'll just trigger things. I'd encourage people to think about any questions that might be arising, and we will look now at a slightly more complicated configuration. He says, integrations, webhooks. So this is the one that we've just set up, and this is what we are seeing coming through here. Before I forget, because this is a totally live demonstration, and I don't recommend doing this without putting some basic authentication on. But in theory, 2021, yeah, 2021, there's one I prepared earlier. You can access it through your browser. So you can have your very own mini console. I've got my medium console, and big thumbs up to the team for putting in this little checkbox here for the verbose stream, because my eyes did start bleeding a little while back. But anyway, on with the more complex install. So I have a web space that I use as like the kitchen sink, somewhere to just put the data. I bought the domain for £6, and I got free web space. I got 10 gigabytes of a SSD space and 1 gigabyte of MySQL database, and that's all I pay. It's not production level, it just provides somewhere for me to throw information, and then if I need to pull it out, I can do. And I have this split up in 2 different ways. I have one copy of the script, and this is where this base URL versus uplink versus this box comes into place. One script that just turns uplinks into tabs, because I can then sort of quickly read what it is. But then I ask it to save everything else that might come along using a script called everything else. You'll see that after 40 years of coding, and slightly longer than 40 years actually, 27 years of running a business, I'm fairly maverick about my my own naming schemes. But what does this give us in reality? Well, if I just open up a recent connection, what this means is that we have the same sort of tab delimited files coming through, and you can pipe everything else. So if we have a look at that, we will turn that into formatted JSON, and you can see that's a join accept. So once you've got a base up and running, you can use these boxes to set different directions that different scripts, different directories are used. And to take this slightly further, if we look in Webhook path variables, I heard someone mention that the documentation is improved over V2. The documentation, I think, is excellent. For those of you who bump into me on the forum, you will see me whining about people not reading the documentation, because most of the time I can just put a link in that says, read this. But anyway, if I want to separate out which folder or directory things go into, I can use path variables, and you can see here we can separate things out. So you could have a directory that just processes the join requests, or you could use it to separate things out by different sort of app IDs, or even the device UI or dev IDs. So there's a whole raft of different possibilities that you can get into here, into separating out where on your server. And I actually have a server that is like the master that's used, and it takes all sorts of data, and then it gets redirected now into different folders, whereas previously it just got a little bit messy as to where things were going to go. So that gives you some idea of the possibilities. You could just start out with this base URL in the same way that we have done here. You do need to turn on at least one of these for you to get some messages. But between this additional path and you, by putting in the parameters, you have a lot of possibilities there. So I'm going to move on to see where we're at. I would encourage people, if they don't mind, to fill the poll in on what is your preferred web server language, if only so that it just helps the community figure out which things we should be coding in, because there's a lot of resources out there and a lot of different expertise. And if it turns out there's a whole pile of people who like Perl, you know, that's actually where I started once upon a time. And I've obviously stunned everybody into silence because they're neither chatting nor Q&A-ing. So I'm just going to pause and wait for someone to fill the poll in. I'm going to be, I'll fill mine. Oh, right. Okay. So sorry, I have to vote. Sorry, my bad. Anyone want to ask a question? Okay. So where do I get this template from? So I have a GitHub that has this. The webhook to tab PHP is there. But also we have the MQTT to tab, which does pretty much identically the same, except it has to be running as a service either on a server or on your desktop, which is slightly more vulnerable because somebody could turn it off or the server process could stop. Whereas the nice thing about PHP, Apache, MySQL is it's a known entity that just keeps on trucking and it is stateless. There is also a data storage if you're using that as a backup medium for quickly pulling down your data. Data storage is great as backup, but it doesn't give you much of the metadata. So you can't do all of the analysis that you might want to do on signal strength and which gateway's heard. But as a backup, it is absolutely fantastic. Coming soon to this section, he says, trying to just sort of see which folder he's about to unveil upon the world, will be some more API examples to help take things further. If I actually get up this one, this is a fully fleshed out example of taking the PHP on to the next level. Just have a look to see how people are getting on. So fast we're having to concentrate. I'm not sure if that's a Jeff thing or whether it's everybody else. This is why they're recorded. This is why they're recorded, but we'll get there. If the communication established between the things stack and your demo is secure, for how have you established enabled? Probably, he says. Let's have a look. Yes. So to answer one of the questions in the chat, because it turns out I'm more relaxed than I thought. You can see there I've got HTTPS running as part of the URL, so that transfer is encrypted. Obviously, within the JSON, which we can look at in a second, the payload is still in base64 format, but that's not got any level of encryption on. Whereas because it's inside the TTS system, the web server, the web client element will encrypt it. It's passed across the internet, decrypted by Apache, and then presented to PHP. So you do then end up with end-to-end encryption throughout the path. Let's go back to this fully formed system. So much of the code at the top is the same from 2018, 2019. This is a community hydroelectric project. So this is all version 2 format. You can see I'm pulling out a variety of different information. But the most exciting bit here is that in this section here, we're actually decoding the raw payload. So we take our base 64 and decode it. We turn it into, we take it from binary into hexadecimal, we then uppercase it, and then I just cut up, and that's what this string does for me here, because it enables me to count. So I can go 0, 1, 2, 3, etc., and see the different groups. Within this, we actually ended up sending a signed variable, so we have to do the calculations for that. Don't recommend it. It's much easier to set an offset. So you just sort of add for 200, which lets you go down to like 200 degrees if it's a temperature. And then further on down, we make a connection to the SQL Server. We look for any gateways that are new. We insert gateways, and after that, we then insert the various different signal strengths. We then take the device data, and if that's new, we then insert that into the database. And then finally, we can then insert the data and join up the device and gateways and application as is appropriate. And you can see the whole of this script runs to about 230 lines. So what does that mean in practice? Well, again, if you've got these as templates, it means that after you've done some excruciatingly exciting SQL, and this is where you need a multidisciplinary development team, but as I say, I've been doing this a while, and you build up a toolkit. But this basically gives us some nice averages over a time period that we can then return as JSON, and then that can go back to a web client or an application or some such. So that's actually day data. And for ease of use, I just separated out these two into one for current data, which seems to be sort of taking it over a certain sort of time period. One of the things I've found is that the time series databases are great when you have a development team, which I sort of do, sort of don't. So I tend to prototype just using the tools I've built up over the many years of using MySQL. And it's very easy to compact and analyze using a background script so that you can get out the average for the hour. And it's doing a very similar thing to the way that the time series databases do. It may not be optimal, but when you're developing, it does the job, and you can then move on towards a more appropriate environment. So I'll just take a quick squint at that. Thank you, Jeff, for putting the link in. Jack, any experience with getting LoRaWAN encrypted payload and decrypting and decoding? Me personally, no. The maths is let's just say I didn't do as well in A-level maths. No, we could do. I came to LoRaWAN 2.5, 3 years ago via HAB. So I'm not playing catch up with much of the technology, but the bit in the middle, that's what the stack does for me. I can make devices. I have my own tiny things. There's some scattered around here somewhere. I can make the PCBs. I can write the firmware. But the really complicated, keeping it going, storing the data, that's what the stack does for me. And for that, I will be eternally grateful to the team in Amsterdam and around the world. But it's something that we could work on together on the forum. So yes, I think Jack's answered Tony Smith's question. You don't have to do anything, and you can't keep it on a local computer. You need it to be a web server because it needs to be outside of your, unless you start doing things with routers and firewalls. So it pushes as things arrive, and you can just use a £6, €6. You'd even use free hosting, but I wouldn't actually use free hosting because it's terminally slow. Okay, yeah, you need, as Jack says, you need a public IP. You can set that up using your router at home, but it is a little bit variable. But we can chat about these on the forum. Gareth, are there any tools for helping develop with these webhooks, triggering the hook without actually needing the proper uplink? Sort of. Let's get to end devices, generic node. If I do a message, we will simulate an uplink. It may choke because I haven't actually sort of put all of that together. Did that appear in Firehouse? Uplink generic node. No, okay, that's that actually needs sort of waking back up again. But let's now see in here if we simulate it's worked. Generic node 1127, that's time. So what? We'll do it again with something a little bit more obvious. Right, so it's a little bit larger. But one of the things that I do is help people develop a whole, so so that's come through here. So you can just use the console to simulate an uplink. Obviously it round trips and you need to upload your code back. Some other day, I might be persuaded to talk about writing the frameworks that you use so you don't have to download firmware to the device to test things, and you don't have to upload PHP. Right, so I'm coming to sort of the end. Have I covered all of the things? We're going to have a quick look at the payload because I hope this will actually make Jeff's head explode in a lovely sort of way. Jeff, my fellow moderator. So this is what the JSON sort of looks like, and it looks a bit full on, and there's lots of information in there, but a lot of it is hugely useful. But the heart of the matter is within the uplink message. So you can sort of see that I actually used a payload decoder. But I am going to stop talking. Oh, Jeff's head's gone bang. I'm thinking Mr. Creosote here. So any other questions in the last dying minute or so? For those that want to go further, I've started an entry on the forum. Just ask questions, really. I'd expect to develop further the template, but I really want feedback from you guys because I've already got tools that work, and some of my tools are a bit older or esoteric. You tell us what we need, and we can make that happen. Just check the Q&A tab. No, we didn't use that. So Python, yes. Node.js. Yeah. Sorry, Node fills my backups with 40,000 files just for saying hello world, which is Python, yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for your time. And as I say, do come over to the forum and ask any other questions. And keep an eye on the GitHub repository as I head into it. Thank you very much.